After that interview went viral, where Shedeur Sanders spoke openly about his readiness, something shifted inside the Browns facility. His reps were monitored. Mentions of his name became taboo. And gradually, the bright young quarterback who should have been embraced was instead isolated. The confrontation with Stefanski wasn't a meltdown. It was the only outlet left. Sanders didn't lose control. He demanded answers. And the silence he was met with was louder than any shouting could have been.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
That exchange crystallized something many had suspected. Sanders is being buried under layers of control and favoritism, not based on performance, but on politics. In challenging the hierarchy, he's also become the face of what it means to demand fair treatment in a league still wrestling with its own systemic failings. Shedeur Sanders didn't walk into Cleveland to be anyone's backup story. But right now, that's exactly how the Browns organization is trying to frame him: quiet, compliant, invisible, until the footage dropped. In a single viral clip, all of it cracked open. You see Shedeur on the practice field, confronting head coach Kevin Stefanski, not out of ego, but out of necessity. He's asking the questions no one else seems brave enough to voice. What's the offensive plan? Where do I fit? Why does effort and readiness still mean nothing here? And Stefanski? He offers no real answers. Just sidesteps and avoidance. Try to move past it like it's routine. But it's not routine. It's a boiling point. A moment that says, this isn't about football anymore. This is about a player being systematically muted inside a culture that values control more than progress. This wasn't a one-off confrontation. This was months of tension finally surfacing. Since Shedeur got to Cleveland, it's been a quiet campaign to keep him small. After a viral interview where he confidently said he was ready to play, the entire organization seemed to shift into defense mode. PR reps began trailing him. His name started disappearing from public discussion. Media outlets were stonewalled when they asked about him. Stefanski wouldn't even say his name. A quarterback with clear upside, an elite football IQ, and leadership traits that teammates respect. Being treated like a distraction, all for having the nerve to say, publicly, that he's prepared. The Browns didn't reward his professionalism. They punished it. And then there's Dylan Gabriel, the supposed QB1, the guy Stefanski keeps backing, despite the team spiraling to a 2-7 record and an offense that hasn't clicked all season. Gabriel hasn't been awful. He's just been underwhelming. And that's the issue. How do you justify leaving a highly capable quarterback on the bench while your offense struggles to score, drive, or inspire any sense of momentum? You don't, unless something else is in play. And it is connections, loyalty, conflict of interest. Gabriel and Stefanski's collegiate network overlaps. They share the same representation. These are the kinds of ties that don't show up on the depth chart, but absolutely show up in the decisions. The favoritism isn't hidden. It's baked into how the Browns operate. So while Gabriel continues to start games and throw checkdowns, Sanders is frozen out, not because of what he can't do, but because of what he represents. And what he represents is disruption. He's not part of the inner circle. He didn't come in to wait his turn. He came in confident, clear, and unwilling to play the politics game. And in a league and an organization that rewards silence and submission, that makes him a threat. The Browns have made that painfully obvious, assigning PR handlers to control him, avoiding any mention of him in interviews, acting like his mere presence is a problem that needs managing. That's not development. That's suppression. The NFL has a long, ugly history of doing this to players who don't fit its preferred narrative. And when those players come with high-profile names and strong identities, especially black quarterbacks who refuse to downplay their readiness, the double standard hits harder. Shedeur has felt that at every level. Passed over in the draft more than once. Ignored not because of talent, but because of what people think his name means. They see Deion Sanders in his DNA, and instead of legacy, they see noise. Instead of preparation, they see arrogance. It's bias, plain and simple, and the league hasn't outgrown it. So it tracks that in Cleveland, where the front office has shown a clear preference for familiar and the controllable, Shedeur's confidence became something to silence. But here's what the Browns didn't expect. He never folded. He didn't lash out. He didn't vent on social media. He didn't leak stories or stir up controversy. He kept working, kept preparing, kept carrying himself like a starter, even as the team treated him like a footnote. And when that confrontation at practice happened, it was earned, not in anger, but in clarity. He deserved answers. He deserved transparency. He deserved honesty. Instead, he got shrugged off, and the entire world got to see it. The silence is no longer manageable. The footage made sure of that. It ripped open the narrative the Browns were trying to maintain, that everything is under control, that Sanders is still developing, and that Gabriel is the right choice. None of that holds anymore, because the reality is louder now. The locker room feels it. Morale suffers when hard work isn't recognized, when effort is punished and performance doesn't matter. These things eat at a team from the inside out. You can't preach accountability and transparency while protecting one player with connections and silencing another who's earned his place. It doesn't work, and players notice. So does the public. Fans see through this now. They're connecting the dots. A 2-7 record. An ineffective offense. A young quarterback being erased instead of evaluated. And a head coach who still can't give a straight answer when asked about it. That's not sustainable. The Browns are facing more than a quarterback controversy. They're facing a credibility crisis. And the clock is ticking. They've boxed themselves in. If they play Shedeur now, they admit they've been wrong all along. That the favoritism, the censorship, the excuses, they weren't football decisions. They were politics. If they don't play him, they'll lose him. And they'll deserve to. Because Shedeur Sanders has done more than enough to prove his worth. He's been composed, sharp, resilient, and now public. If they can't see that, someone else will. And fast. There are teams out there that want quarterbacks like him. Talented, confident, unafraid to speak up, willing to lead. He's not a backup. He's not a placeholder. He's a starter. The only question left is where. And that's Cleveland's biggest fear. Because if he leaves and succeeds, and he will, this organization will be remembered for what it truly is, a franchise that protected the wrong people, suppressed the right ones, and buried its own potential under layers of old-school politics. The leaked footage wasn't a disruption. It was the truth breaking through the lies. And now, Shedeur holds the power, not just over his future, but over Cleveland's reputation moving forward. The question is no longer can he lead. It's where will he lead? If you're watching this and you're fed up with the same old excuses from these teams, if you're tired of seeing talented players pushed down to protect mediocrity, go ahead and like this video. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Should Shedeur stay and force Cleveland to face itself, or take a shot with a team that actually values fairness? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories they don't want getting out. Because now that the silence is broken, there's no going back. The silence is broken, and the Browns have nowhere left to hide. When a practice confrontation becomes national news, when a coach gets caught on camera sidestepping a player's completely valid demands for clarity, when the internet is watching, dissecting, and reacting in real time, you've lost control of the narrative. And for the Cleveland Browns, that control was everything. But it's gone now, because Shedeur Sanders shattered the myth of competition. He exposed the truth. This isn't about who's ready, who's skilled, or who's earned it. It's about who's allowed. And he hasn't been. Let's make one thing absolutely clear. This man has been ready. Shedeur didn't just arrive in Cleveland with a name. He arrived with tape, with numbers, with maturity, with discipline, and with the mental toughness of someone who's been under a microscope since day one and still refuses to flinch. And still, he was reduced to a background character in his own professional journey. They weren't just not playing him. They were pretending he wasn't even there. That's the part that made this whole thing worse. It wasn't about waiting his turn. It was about being erased. Stefanski wouldn't say his name. PR staff hovered any time media came near. Discussions about his potential were discouraged. He became a ghost in his own locker room. Not because he wasn't performing, but because he might disrupt the system if people realize he was the better option. That's the part that cuts the deepest. That someone could do everything right and still get ignored. Not for lack of skill, but for being inconvenient to someone else's plan. And then there's Dillon Gabriel, the quarterback who's played like someone constantly looking over his shoulder, but still being told he's secure. The numbers are mid. The offense is bottom tier. And yet, somehow, he gets protection. Not just from pressure on the field, but from criticism off it. Because Gabriel isn't just a quarterback. He's part of the web. Same agent. Same coaching circles. Same closed-door handshakes that keep careers afloat regardless of what happens on game day. That's why Stefanski won't budge. That's why Shedeur's name can't even be spoken aloud. Because admitting that he deserves a shot would mean exposing that Gabriel doesn't. This isn't speculation. It's a pattern. And Shedeur's been at the center of it long before Cleveland. Let's not forget, he wasn't supposed to fall in the draft. He wasn't supposed to get passed over again and again. But he did. Why? Because the NFL doesn't like players who come in with something to say. Especially not when their last name comes with media attention. Especially not when their confidence gets misinterpreted as cockiness. And especially not when they challenge the status quo. That's why Cleveland jumped at the chance to stash him away. They weren't drafting a quarterback. They were managing a variable. Keep him quiet. Keep him visible just enough to say they're developing him, but never enough to let him shine. It's all performative. But what they forgot is that a player like Shedeur doesn't stay quiet forever. And when the confrontation happened, when that footage leaked, when the world got to see him standing there, asking Stefanski point-blank about the plan, about the direction, about his role, it was a shift. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't emotional. He was clear, and that scared them more than anything. Because if he had flown off the handle, they could have used that. He's not ready. He's immature. He's emotional. The same lazy tropes the NFL loves to use when they want to knock a confident young player back into his place. But he didn't give them that. What he gave them was poised accountability. And that's lethal to a system built on excuses. The organization didn't just look weak. They looked exposed. You could see the panic in Stefanski's non-answers. The discomfort. The dodging. Because when the truth walks right up to you in front of the entire team, there's nowhere to run. And now that it's public, what's left? How does this team explain the decision to ignore a young, high IQ quarterback when the current starter is drowning and the season is spiraling? How do they justify suppressing media attention, assigning handlers, and erasing a player's presence from a narrative when that player hasn't done a single thing wrong? You can't. Not anymore. The moment Shedeur raised his voice in that practice, he wasn't just fighting for a shot. He was fighting for a principle. The right to be evaluated on merit. The right to compete. The right to exist in a system that spent every second trying to pretend he doesn't. And that fight hit home. Teammates saw it. Fans saw it. The league saw it. Because if it can happen to him, if a player with this much discipline, this much poise, and this much upside can be buried, then it can happen to anyone. That's the message this moment sends. And that's why it's bigger than just one player. This is a direct challenge to every old boys network still operating behind the scenes in this league. Every coach who picks his guy and sticks with him regardless of performance. Every front office that treats talent like a liability. If it talks too much, shines too bright, or challenges a chain of command. Shedeur Sanders isn't trying to be a disruptor. He's trying to be a quarterback. But in this league, the two often mean the same thing. So now the Browns have a decision to make. Keep pretending this is all under control. Keep trotting out Gabriel. Keep ignoring the elephant in the room and hoping the public forgets. Or face the music. They can acknowledge the bias, the favoritism, the missed opportunity. They can open the door for competition. Not just for Shedeur, but for the culture they claim to value. Because here's the truth they can't run from anymore. Every game Sanders sits is a game where the Browns choose silence over substance. Politics over performance. Loyalty over logic. And if they're not careful, they won't just lose Shedeur. They'll lose the locker room. Because nothing kills morale faster than watching one of your own get iced out while the scoreboard keeps bleeding. Players talk. And when they see leadership reward familiarity instead of performance, It breaks something you can't always get back. Shedeur has already won in one sense. He's exposed it. They can't unsee what's been shown. They can't unsay what's been said. The fans? They're not buying the canned responses anymore. The media? They've started asking the real questions. And the team? They either course correct or they double down and risk it all. Because this is now a crossroads. Not just for Shedeur, but for Cleveland. Does he stay and continue to force change from within? Does he ride it out and hope the pressure finally bursts the dam wide open? Or does he ask out, force a trade, go to a team that doesn't treat confidence as a character flaw and leadership as a threat? Either path makes sense, but only one of them leads to growth for him and for the league, because what Shedeur Sanders has done, without theatrics, without drama, is challenge the system. And win or lose, start or sit, stay or go, he's already left a mark. He's already cracked open a playbook on how power really works in this sport. And now the rest of us are watching the clock. Everyone's listening. And for the first time, the narrative isn't controlled by a front office, a carefully worded press release, or some coach feeding generic answers to beat reporters. It's being controlled by the truth, the raw, uncomfortable truth that's now sitting squarely in the Browns' lap, courtesy of a young quarterback who refused to be sidelined into silence. What Shedeur Sanders did, what he dared to do, was ask questions the system isn't built to answer. Questions that make coaches sweat, executives squirm, and team PR departments work overtime. Questions like, why am I not part of the plan? Why does performance take a backseat to politics? Why are we losing and still protecting mediocrity? Those aren't diva questions. Those are leadership questions. And Stefanski's inability to respond in that moment wasn't just telling. It was devastating. Because here's what we all saw. Stefanski didn't look like a coach in control. He looked like a man caught in the middle of a narrative he could no longer spin. Caught between protecting his chosen QB and facing the reality that Shedeur Sanders might be exactly what this team needs, on the field, in the locker room, and at the center of the huddle. And it's not like this team has earned the benefit of the doubt. Cleveland is 2-7. Let that sink in. 2 wins, 7 losses. A spiraling season with 0 rhythm on offense, 0 energy on the sidelines, and 0 urgency from the coaching staff to try something new. Yet the one player who's done everything right, the one who stayed locked in, kept his head down, shown maturity beyond his years, is still on the sidelines, stuck in a holding pattern orchestrated by a system that clearly never planned to let him rise. That's the piece that stings. This wasn't about development. It wasn't about easing him in or protecting him from pressure. It was about never planning to give him a real shot in the first place. And that's not just football negligence. That's systemic rot. When a player with talent, discipline, and leadership is told to sit quietly while a quarterback with worse production, better connections, and 0 accountability keeps getting trotted out like he's earned the right to fail, what message does that send? It says you're only valuable if you're manageable. It says you're only welcome if you play the game off the field too. It says that in a league that claims to be about competition and merit, relationships still run the show. And that's what makes Shedeur's confrontation so significant. He didn't just challenge a coaching decision. He challenged a systemic philosophy. And now the Browns are scrambling. Because the worst part isn't that the footage leaked. It's that it confirmed what so many people already knew. That the Browns have been treating Shedeur like a branding risk instead of a football asset. That his confidence made them uncomfortable. That his last name made them cautious. That the organizational culture valued control more than potential. And you can't PR your way out of that. You can't slap a statement on Twitter and pretend this was just a competitive moment or healthy dialogue. We all saw it. We saw a quarterback calmly ask for clarity. And we saw a coach panic. And now we're watching the fallout unfold in real time. Because this isn't just about what happens next with Shedeur. It's about what happens next with everyone else. The locker room, the coaching staff, the front office, the fans, the media. Every one of them is now operating in a new reality. Shedeur spoke, and the truth followed. Teammates are watching. Quietly, publicly, socially. They know what fair treatment looks like, and they know when it's not happening. Morale doesn't dip because you're losing. It dips when people stop believing the people in charge have a plan worth following. And if Stefanski's plan is to bury talent to protect bad decisions, he's going to lose that locker room faster than he lost fan base. The players see the double standard. And more than that, they feel it. It's in the reps that don't get handed out. It's in the names that don't get mentioned. It's in the hush-hush meetings and whispered excuses. And when you treat one of your most prepared, focused players like a liability, just because he asked to be evaluated fairly, it sends a signal to everyone. Play politics, or get played. And that's not how winning organizations operate. So what does Cleveland do now? Double down and hope the media cycle passes? Keep Gabriel under center until the season completely implodes and hope nobody keeps count of the losses? Or finally acknowledge what they've refused to for weeks, that Shedeur Sanders has earned more than respect. He's earned a shot. But here's the thing. It may already be too late. Because if you're Shedeur, how do you stay in a place that went out of his way to ignore you? That didn't just fail to support you. They actively worked to minimize you, not because you couldn't deliver, but because you weren't convenient. And now that everything's out in the open, there are two paths left. Cleveland admits the mistake, clears the politics, and gives him a real chance. Starting now, not a symbolic snap late in a blowout, not a we'll evaluate in the offseason cop-out, a real chance. Starting job. Clean reps, full evaluation, public backing. Or Shedeur walks, requests a trade, and becomes the quarterback he was always meant to be somewhere else. Somewhere that doesn't shrink in the face of confidence. Somewhere that values leadership over loyalty. Somewhere that doesn't treat visibility like a threat. And when that happens, because at this rate it will happen, the Browns will have to live with the fact that they had him, and they chose silence instead. They didn't just mismanage a player. They misread a moment. They underestimated what happens when a young man with talent and truth on his side stops waiting and starts talking. And now, it's not just about this team anymore. This moment is resonating across the league. Players are watching. Young quarterbacks who've been asked to wait their turn are watching. Coaches who think they can keep the same tired rotation going forever are watching. Agents, execs, media, all watching. Because the Shedeur Sanders moment isn't just a practice clash. It's a turning point. If you had enough of the double standards, of the gatekeeping, of the fake meritocracy, hit that like button, drop a comment. Should Shedeur stay and force their hand, or leave and finally take control of his career? And if you want to keep digging into the moments the league doesn't want us to see, subscribe. Because we're not done watching. And neither is Shedeur.